This episode of YXE Underground is supported by Mutt Hut Grooming in Saskatoon. If your dog or cat needs a haircut, Nikki and her team at the Mutt Hut is the place to take them. Hello and welcome to Season 7 of YXE Underground. I'm your host Eric Anderson, and right now we are on the TCU stage with the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra. Musicians are warming up in preparation for a special show on this night. It's a celebration of Fleetwood Mac's career, and so the symphony will be performing alongside a rock and roll band playing all of Fleetwood Mac's hits. There is a great energy in the room, and that extends out into the lobby where we find Mark Turner. Mark is the CEO and creative producer of the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra and seems to know everyone in the lobby right now. He's shaking hands, having quick chats with people, and sharing his enthusiasm for tonight's show. Mark has gone through this lobby routine hundreds of times in the past 10 years with the SSO. His leadership and passion for connecting the symphony with different parts of our community has helped make the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra one of the most successful symphonies in Canada. Stephanie Unverrecht has seen the SSO grow in popularity during her time as principal bassoon player. For 13 years, Stephanie has had what she describes as the best seat in the orchestra. The brass section is behind her, the percussion players are to her right, and she looks out over the string players to the audience. I spoke with Stephanie on stage as she was preparing her bassoon for the performance.
We are so lucky to have Mark Turner here leading the orchestra.
Why do you say that?
Because he is a visionary. He has brought us to a whole new level multiple times in a row now, and I can't wait to see what the future holds with him at the helm.
Is that, like, as a player, is it inspiring when you have that type of leadership?
Absolutely it is. I have someone that is bringing in new ideas, that's pushing me to my max, and at the same time, I know that he is always supportive of what I'm doing, so I'm not scared to try the new things.
It's time for the show, and Mark Turner is standing on the side of the stage, clapping and cheering on the start of the performance. Now, I've been a fan of Mark's from afar for many years, so it was a real thrill to meet him in his office a few weeks ago to talk about the incredible growth of the SSO and why connecting with diverse communities means so much to him.
I kind of feel that this is actually the perfect fit for me. I was able to, and hilariously, I joke that in high school, for a couple of years, I was band student president. And then I just grew up to be band student president. So it worked out really well. But yeah, the creative side of things, I mean, I was a pianist and I worked a lot with singers and I did a little teaching and I enjoyed all of that. It wasn't until I produced a concert that I went, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. And when you're a young musician, your teachers tell you things like, well, you can perform and you can teach, or you can perform or teach, you can do. No one told me, oh, you can also produce. And so I accidentally fell into producing a few things at the refinery back in the day, and then ended up producing a piano recital here in town. And that night on stage introducing the show, I went, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do.
Okay, so can you walk listeners through what producing a concert looks like? Like just the sort of nuts and bolts, and whether it is at the refinery or with the symphony now, like what does producing a concert look like?
So for me, I always start with it's interesting because I'm currently programming or finishing the programming on our 95th season with my staff, and so, I sort of, and before long, that means I'll move into 96 and 97 quite quickly. And what I sort of start to think about is the outcome, what we want people to feel when they're leaving. So from that moment on, you try and create an idea of a concert that, whether you want it to be inspirational, exhilarating, whether you want people to leave, with an abundant sense of joy or completely devastated. And then I work backwards from that, and so then I start to look at an artist or artists who can really pull that off, repertoire that will do that, the music, the things that make a difference in how a night comes out, and then it's sort of like a giant puzzle. You piece things together from there. So for a concert this season, we were looking at having Tanya Miller home. She's a phenomenal conductor who grew up here in Saskatchewan. She's one of the world's most renowned conductors, and so we're thrilled to have her home. She's with us twice, and when I was talking to Tanya about our concert with her in May, we talked about we wanted to leave people exhilarated. It's May. They're having to come to the symphony instead of spend the night in their garden, so you want them to feel like they have taken the time away from nature and their own lives, but have been moved so deeply that it's not only been worth it, but it's transformed them or helped them learn something about themselves in that process. And so working with Tanya on that and piecing bits and pieces of that together, came up with the music, came up with the guest artist, and then you kind of stand back and go, yeah, that'll work. And from then on out, I hand it over to some of the staff here who then figure out all the nuts and bolts and the logistics of, booking the artist, finding the flights, doing all that, hunting down the music. Sometimes that's, we're doing a concert this coming March, and we're programming a piece by Handel. And the conductor and I sat this past winter and went, okay, we want to do this piece. It's Dixit Dominus by Handel. It's this choral work. It's fast. It's virtuosic. It's going to leave people so blown away. And then we programmed it and we announced it. And that was part of the season. And then my librarian, Matt, said to me, he's like, yeah, I can't get that music. And it's like, what do you mean you can't get? It's 300-year-old music. What do you mean you can't get that? It should be available everywhere. And we had to hunt it down to find it and actually purchase it, which who knew that it wasn't out there, and it had to be sourced and found, and usually old music is easy to find. Yeah. And so this was a unique situation that then there's always stumbling blocks. Inevitably there's also always surprises where you've booked something and then you either the artist has to change, the artist's sick, inevitably there's always something that can create a stumbling block. But I do start at that where I want the audience to experience something. And so when building a full season now, I think we have 30 plus concerts this coming season. You sort of plot the emotions along a longer timeline.
Is that what? How do you figure out how to do that? Like, what prepares you to? Because that's a big thing. Because, like you said, for example, a concert in May, people might want to be outside, so you want to exhilarate them. How does one develop that skill?
Trial and error. I think, I've put a lot of things on stage in 14, 15 years, and not all of them have worked. Much of it has, so I'm grateful for that. I think a lot about the audience. I sort of became obsessed with the idea that arts organizations historically, at least for the last 100 years, became really about the people inside them. Particularly orchestras, they were picking music that, oh, well, I love this piece, or we've always wanted to play this piece, so we're going to play it. And my question has always been, but does the audience want it? Because at the end of the day, it's just about the audience. We're just here for them. And so I think we sort of took on this attitude of radical relevance, where we wanted to make sure that if we were going to do something old, it had new relevance. And so you have to sort of think outside the box when you're using really old music, and music that is still as incredible as the day it was written, and sometimes still as contextually relevant as it was the day it was written, but new audiences don't know that. if they've never heard it, if they've never experienced, how do you know that you love the Enigma variations? How do you know that pictures at an exhibition is going to make you feel something? And so then that's when we start to look at how we communicate about it, what kind of relationships we build within the community to make sure we're getting the right people in the room, who we're reaching out to, and sometimes that comes right down to guest artists or conductors or partners on a program that we look at and go, we want to build a relationship within this musical scope. So the last few years we've had the Persian Baroque group Constantinople here twice. They are out of this world. I saw them in Europe, actually. They're from Montreal, but I saw them in Europe a few years ago, and I remember sitting there and I caught myself with this goofy smile on my face because the people on stage also had goofy smiles on their faces. And so I wanted to bring them here, and we just had them here this past winter, and there was a large community of people from Syria and Iran who came to the performance and were thanking us because they're going, we never thought this group would ever come to Saskatoon. And so being able to make sure that, we're not just piano concertos and symphonies, we actually have to look at all aspects of music. And it was during the pandemic that we changed our mission statement, which was god-awful boring. And I'm sure it was written in like the 1980s for a grant and no one changed it, right? And so it used to be something, Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra is a professional orchestra that provides concert and education programming to the region of Saskatoon. Like, it was just so dry. And we were doing a new strategic plan for the organization with the board, and I suggested a new mission statement of the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra shares the joy, hope, and community of making music. And from that moment on, it really radically changed us and how we think about it. And it is actually ingrained in all of our decisions, right down to producing and figuring out what audiences are going to feel when they leave.
The term that is so interesting, and you're right too about a mission statement can really go a long way, and that sort of ties into, you mentioned something earlier about the radical relevancy. Like, it's one thing, Mark, to say that, but like I'm sure that at the time would have been a shift within your organization, just as I'm sure it was for the mission statement too. Is that hard within an organization that's been around for a long time? Is it hard, that type of change?
That's a great question. So the thing is, I love change. And so I know that many people do not. And historically, classical music doesn't like change. And so, I sort of run towards it with reckless abandon, I think. I think actually if you're not taking a risk, that's the risk. And so change for me is a really comfortable place. And I had to help others here learn that risk was a good thing and change was a good thing. And it was challenging. I mean, there were people who really questioned where we were going with things, how we were doing things. And then you do start to see the results. You do get to see audiences coming in and experiencing something they never thought they would. One of my favorite things about our seasons is our Disney movies. We try to do a big Disney movie every year. We just did The Lion King last year. We were the first orchestra in the world to do it. I had to convince Disney to present it, and it was a whole thing. It took about 3 years to build. And
hold on, it took 3 years to convince Disney to bring The Lion King?
It took a long time. I had asked a number of times, and they kept saying no. And so then it was, the 40th or 30th anniversary was coming up, and I said, I think it's really important. And so talked to other orchestras, drummed up interest, and then it happened. And they came and did it here first because we're a great low risk market. If all of a sudden something falls apart, the film stops, the click track that the musicians have in their ears is off. So low risk audience, right? It's not New York, it's not LA, where there's a lot on the line, and so they were able to come and do it here. So it was a really cool experience. To usually you do these things and they send you the music, but they couldn't send us the music as early because it literally didn't exist yet, because they had to create the parts from the original to make it work. It was quite the thing.
Wow.
But those shows are so cool because there's so many people who come to it who have never been to the symphony before and wouldn't. And it's funny. I when I first started in the orchestral world, a lot of people talked about, like, how do we get pops audiences to come to our classical shows? and I don't really care. I want people to come to a show because they want to come to a show and they want to enjoy what they're experiencing, and they want to feel something. And if that means they only come to one thing with the SSO ever, great. I hope we made them feel something on the way out. If then they fall in love with more music and they now start, looking it up on their phones or coming to other shows or going to other music outings, that's great too. But I we really wanted to find a way that made it less about us and less about what we historically had done and more about what the audience actually needs, what a community needs from its orchestra.
When you started to see the results then too, and your team started to see that, did that give you the confidence to know that you were kind of on the right path? And I'm wondering too, one of the things I wanted to ask you about too was the fact that you stream so many concerts, and especially during the pandemic. But like, it just seems to me like you guys are doing so much to reach, to, I guess, think outside the box and to reach new audiences within Saskatoon and beyond. But when you started to see the positive results, was that a way of building your confidence? Like, okay, we're doing the right thing?
Yeah, and I started pretty early on in my time here changing the way we did things, and we saw some pretty instant successes, and we took some major risks, and it worked, and it panned out, and so it was really satisfying to see that that the change wasn't for naught. It had real outcomes. A few years ago, I had one of the musicians in the orchestra who came up to me at a concert or a rehearsal and said, you were right, because we're selling so many tickets, and like, you were right about this. It is actually working, which of course meant at some point they might have considered it wasn't. But I didn't ask that. But it was such a compliment because we can see it, we hear it. Musicians typically come. It's a lot of work. They have a hugely stressful job, and they don't necessarily get to interact with the audience in the same way staff does, or because particularly after a concert, you're tired. You've had a long day. You're exhausted. You're physically exhausted, mentally exhausted. So you don't necessarily get to wander through a lobby and find out. And so when this musician said this to me, I'm so happy, because it was like, yes, it is actually working. This is really cool. Putting different types of musicians and artists on stage with us has a huge impact. And that experience might actually have come. We did a concerto a few years ago with the composer Danuk Wijaratna, who wrote a tabla concerto, and I don't think most people think of tabla concertos being part of most orchestras' standard repertoire. You think violin concertos and piano concertos and Beethoven and that sort of thing. It was such a unique experience to have this instrument that historically wasn't part of the Western musical tradition, but because Danuk is Sri Lankan, he was able to bring his own musical traditions and his learned musical Western traditions into this and create something special. And you start to understand that music isn't about borders or places in the world, and you kind of come to accept that actually, music is just simply about being together, experiencing something together, having that sensation of finding a home together in a musical experience that might last 20 minutes and still be so moving that 1,000 people, 2,000 people in a room can all have a very personal experience collectively together. And I think that's, in a world that has been complicated by politics, climate, media, fake news, all the things that we can find ourselves complicated in. I think, embracing the change that we have has allowed us to kind of create these moments of community. I hesitate to use the word. Well, I guess it's sort of a spiritual experience. It's a different type. It's not necessarily a religious experience, but it's that sensation of the triumph of the human spirit together that I think is what orchestras can do best. And so change is hard. but it has worked, and it has paid off in a really remarkable way. When the pandemic hit, I've been looking at streaming for a few years. One of my obsessions is that classical music, by its nature, particularly orchestras, by their nature, are quite inaccessible. You have to have the means, you have to have the location. Like you have to. Historically, with classical music and orchestras, you have to be in the room, and which means you have to afford to be in the room. Putting an orchestra on stage is not a small financial commitment. Everybody's extremely highly trained professional with hours of practice and work to do, and rehearsals and expensive instruments. It's an expensive endeavor, and so the financial barriers and the accessibility barriers, if you're not able to be there due to your mobility, etc., that has always been a challenge for me. And so we'd been looking at streaming beforehand. We'd filmed kind of a concert each year prior to the pandemic, and then when the pandemic struck, we went, let's do it. And I actually said to the staff one day, like, we innovate or die. And so we all went, and somehow magically streamed a concert in the fall of 2020 when none of us knew what we were doing. We'd hired a brilliant videographer, and it happened. And then but in the next few months, we learned so much about ourselves because, we didn't have the audience in the room, which for us was a first. It's a very weird experience to perform into nothingness. And we would get feedback from people watching at home in real time, right? Like if you're at a concert, you can't just say, "Oh, I really like this part." You can't just shout that out. But in streaming, they could. And so we were getting feedback in very real time, and we learned about ourselves that, we sort of thought of, historically, I think we thought of ourselves as Saskatoon's orchestra, and what can we do to get people in the room. And streaming happened, and we realized that was such a limited view of what we actually can be. And that was when I started thinking about the new mission statement and involved that, because I was seeing this sense of joy and community happening even though they weren't in the room. And that really helped solidify things. So we have been streaming since fall of 2020, and we have over 600,000 viewers in 57 countries, more than 35 million minutes of streaming. And so it's been wild.
Like, does that blow your mind a bit?
Yeah, I did. I really wanted to stream in that first year of the pandemic because I wanted to keep the musicians working. I was really focused on that and making sure that they had some stability in a year that none of us knew what that would look like. Also, that they were getting to play with each other. Like orchestral musicians by their nature are a large community. They typically don't simply make music by themselves because that's not what their instruments do. One of my musicians talked about it was hard for her to be at home playing because she had nothing to harmonize with. And that's what they do, right? They play as a group. And so we wanted to keep them playing as a group. And then when it took off online, that was the moment where we went, oh, we've just completely misunderstood what we do. Because it's not about all the things we thought producing concerts or putting concerts on stage was about. It's about connecting. And in those initial months, a lot of people here in town who would regularly come to concerts didn't watch online, but all the people who all of a sudden were watching online, who had never been to the SSO, who would come once a year. We have this wonderful couple from Maple Creek who would drive up about once a year for concerts as a treat, and now they watch everything at home, every single show. And so, there's a family in La Ronge who messaged and said, we were so thrilled we could, the whole family, there's all 6 of us could watch, and we didn't have to come to Saskatoon. And then hearing about, musicians' family members, because musicians are from all over the world, and so hearing about their family members, seeing them play with the SSO for the first time, because they've never been able to make the trip here to see them perform with, it was just such a remarkable understanding of what we can do for accessibility. And even, I know many of our patrons who over the years have aged out, who their mobility has changed. They're not able to, come into a concert in February in the ice and snow is a major risk, and I mean, frankly, I feel that some days, who are then watching at home, and we're allowing them to maintain that love of music in their life. even though they're not able to join us personally in the room, but they can still have that experience. And that to me, the accessibility piece of streaming is what radically changed us.
I also think too, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like the fact that you guys started this, like it had been on your mind, and you started during the fall of that pandemic, and then it takes off. But the fact that you said to your team, like, we either innovate or we die, and then you have obviously thrived. But I think it speaks to your culture here at the symphony that, like, we let's do this. This is different, but we're going to do it, and we have to do it. And then everybody just jumps on board. Like, do you think that speaks to that feeling of change is fine? Let's innovate. Let's try these new things.
Yeah, I do. I mean, we right now we just adopted a new motto, slogan. I don't know really what it is. It's like it's our theme sentence, and it's the future is music. And so, every few seasons we come up with a new slogan. For my first many years here, it was finding our prairie voice and learning how to connect better with the community. And the future is music came out of a bunch of discussions where we were talking about what is music like 50 years from now. And so we were talking about the future of music. And we wanted to have all these conversations about what is music like in the future, and what can we do? And as those conversations were happening within the staff, within the community, with musicians, it became clear, well, actually, no, the future is music. We were off with our words because I think the reason we've been able to be so strong and successful is the audience, is the support there, but also internally, we have a great orchestra. We are so lucky in our city to have this collection of musicians who are not just talented, but there's a drive and a passion to make music and have experiences. Orchestras are hard workplace. It's a high stress work environment because if you make a mistake, the whole room can know, and you not only feel like you've let yourself down, your audience, but your colleagues down there. Like, it's a high stress working environment. And so what I am so thrilled every time I get to see a rehearsal and go to performances is that the orchestra are so kind of passionate about what they do, and I'm blown away by that, because it's easy to become sort of laissez-faire about your work, right? And doing it for many seasons. And so to see people reinvigorated and charged up by it. And also, the team that we built here, the staff, the volunteer team, that ability to want to adapt, to want to do something new. I think it's a corporate culture we've built here that we just are really passionate about how we're not going to do what we always did simply because it's always been done. I was at a conference. I was pre-pandemic. I was going to a lot of conferences internationally and on orchestras, and someone got up and said, well, it'd be nice to see if an orchestra could ever do a season without Mozart, Beethoven, and Brahms. And aside from the Beethoven Symphony No. 9 last year, which it was its 200th anniversary, pardon me. So we had to do it. We haven't had Mozart, Beethoven, or Brahms on the program for 2 past seasons, and now this upcoming season as well. And a handful of people go, oh, I'd really like to see this Mozart. I'd like to hear this Beethoven, and they will. Those pieces will come back, but our opportunity in our organization with the musicians as well to say, music is much more than just the hits on repeat. Orchestras are more than Beethoven 5. Now, it's a great piece, don't get me wrong, phenomenal. But there's so much out there that isn't just the canon, and so being able to see how we've embraced that and succeeded with it, and seen it as a strength, not a weakness. And when someone says, "Oh, I wish orchestras could not program those people," it sounds like a weakness to remove them. But we decided and actively moved ahead with, no, these are our strengths. How do we just make ourselves as a team stronger?
You're listening to the Season 7 debut of YXE Underground. My name is Eric Anderson, and the featured guest is Mark Turner of the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra. If you like what you're hearing so far, please feel free to give the podcast a 5-star review, and don't forget to follow YXE Underground on social media to see some great behind-the-scenes photos of the SSO's recent Fleetwood Mac performance. A big thank you to Mud Hut Grooming for its support of this YXE Underground episode. Getting the word out about all of the SSO shows and then convincing people to come and enjoy a show is a challenge in Saskatoon. There are so many entertainment options in our city, especially when it comes to the arts. Megan Greer is up for the challenge. She is the Director of Marketing and Communications with the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra and works closely with Mark on how to best market each show to specific audiences.
I'm very aware that it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. So, one person might be interested in a piano concerto, but another person might be interested in the fact that their violin teacher is playing. So they're going to buy tickets for different reasons. So we really try to find different messages that are going to call to different people and then just keep throwing spaghetti at the wall to try to get it out there to them. Yeah.
It's just that simple. Hey, throw it out.
Pretty much, yeah. Just, we do a lot of our advertising online, social media. We have a Google search word grant. So Google gives nonprofits free advertising in their Google search. We also don't have a huge budget, so we try to make use of what we can, and then we rely, as much as possible, still on the local media to help share our story as much as possible. So.
In the second part of my conversation with Mark Turner, we discussed the challenges of standing out in a very competitive entertainment market. Mark also looks ahead at how the symphony could potentially evolve to include more audience participation in shows. We pick up the conversation with Mark discussing how best to market the SSO in a competitive market like Saskatoon.
I mean, it's important because you got to sell tickets. It's funny, I gave a presentation a while ago, it was probably a year ago, at a conference, and the presenter before me got up and talked about how arts organizations change lives. And I got up and I said, I 100% agree with you. Sure. But at the end of the day, we sell tickets. Coke is about refreshing people, but it's at the end of the day, it's about selling Coke. We need to communicate about it to make sure as many people know that we're out there, they can come to what we want them to do. But that also means that we need to communicate with them that we want them in the room. And I think that's a crucial part of the way we think about it. Is we try to aim at as many different demographics and groups as possible because we want them to know actually we do want them in the room. I think orchestras have a history of not wanting people in the room. I think classical music adapted well to the pandemic because we've been shaming people for coughing for a very long time. So it's just part of what we do. I think there's been a lot of systemic things that our industry has done that have made it so that only a handful of people feel welcome. And so we started looking at that even long pre-pandemic about what if our musicians aren't in tuxes? Because the tux is a bit stodgy and done. And so we tell people you can wear whatever you want to the symphony. We want them to come, but that means you have to communicate those things to them. It's also been hugely beneficial to streaming things because now we have all these concert films, which means we have hundreds of hours of footage. And so we have a lot of reels that we're able to share on social media, which, is a successful thing. And so that allows people to then also have insight to what it looks like, feels like, and we have a photographer, Julie, who is the best photographer in the world, who comes to every single one of our concerts and captures that. And I think that's such a crucial part of how we communicate as well, because you want people to see what it feels like. And if they don't have that sense, then why would they come? I many years ago, one of my first years, I got up on stage and to do my introductory remarks, and I thanked people for coming instead of staying home and watching Netflix. It was in jest, but sort of also true, because frankly, I could stay at home and watch Netflix. Like, it's so, or whatever streaming, because it's so enjoyable to not have to get dressed up, come home from work and get dressed up, and then park, and if it's winter, you're parking, and now you're walking through snow and it's cold. Like, there's all these barriers to actually leaving your house. And so coming to a concert, communicating about how it will make you feel and what it can do for you. I think music is so, like I said earlier, spiritual. It's a word I kind of stumble over, but I think it is. I think there is something about a lot of people want to go to a concert, any concert, because it's fun, because it moves them, because it makes them feel something that is so different from what they feel in their day-to-day lives. And so being able to communicate that, being able to capture that as an emotion, particularly now through social media, and our website's been successful. We're just redoing it. It's in the process of being redone, and so being able to kind of own that communication ourselves became really important to me. We had, I had years ago, I had a donor in who said to me, well, how come you're not advertising in such and such anymore? And we were. And I was spending a lot of money on that advertising, and I went, oh, so someone who actually is paying attention to that didn't even see our advertisement. So we were part of the noise. And so then it became, okay, how do we not, how can we make this so that we are our own noise, that people are paying attention in a different way? And so we just decided that social media was going to be a big part of that. And it really is. I mean, we have an insane amount of success with that, and connecting with people and trying to create. Each one sort of has its own personality. We're a little bit cheekier on Facebook than we would be anywhere else. We'll put some jokes on Facebook that I'm like, oh, that's yeah, okay, as long as everybody laughs, we're good. Making fun of often about classical music because it's hilarious to make fun of it, because it's a bizarre and crazy pursuit. And so trying to curate that to make sure we get as much of our information out to people as possible.
I do agree with you in terms of the spiritual part of getting you there. I find that music, I think, is one of the very few things in my life where I can very much be in the moment, where I'm not thinking about something in the past or something I should be doing or something that is 10 days away or whatever. Like I'm there present. In the present, yes, and I just think that there's so many things that are trying to pull us from being present, and yet music, like you said, music of any genre, and no matter your cultural background or border or whatever, like it can make you present. I think there's power in that.
There's huge power in that. And intriguingly, my obsession in the last years that we're starting to look at in the coming years is I'm not sure that going to a concert to feel present is enough. And I say that because I think about it myself all the time. And I become obsessed with the idea of, like, could we get people to feel more present if they actually made the music? And so many years ago, we started doing Sing Along Messiah. Handel's Messiah, of course, I think this year is like, it's we 111 years into the tradition of Handel's Messiah here in Saskatoon at Christmas time. So we started the sing-along about 10 years ago when I started, and it was on paper, it's the worst decision ever, because the tickets are like half the price, and tons of people won't come because, I don't want to sing along. Well, you don't have to sing along, you can watch, but it's hard to communicate that. And so there'll be people who will sell out the Friday night performance of it, and they'll be like, I'm not coming to the sing along. And I was like, it's the same show, but they don't quite, and so fair enough. It makes no sense because it has the exact same cost. I'm paying for the orchestra. I've got guest artists, etc., etc. On paper, it's the dumbest concert we do, but it's our favorite day of the year because people come, and sometimes you'll see people come in like a group of friends. You'll see people, a husband and wife come. You'll see a person come all by themselves because they're they're being brave and they just want to sing along. You'll see, people walk in and go, well, not really. Oh, I've never done it, but I'm going to give it a try. And people who've come in and go, oh, I used to sing it every year. And you'll see altos show up with their own books that have like the pages flagged and they're like ready to roll. And there's like 4 tenors. It's never balanced. And then they proceed to sing along with the orchestra and choir in some of the hardest choral music ever written. And it is such a tremendous joy to watch their faces, because instead of sitting there, if they make a mistake, instead of being critical of themselves, they laugh or they go, "Oh God, I'm lost." Or you can see they're not sitting there deciding that a mistake is a bad thing. It's just part of, I got to keep going because everybody's still singing. And singing together, and we have a couple who come who have been longtime symphony subscribers and supporters, and he had faced a stroke a few years ago, and he's no longer verbal, but he can sing, and so he comes to sing along Messiah and can sing, and it's so moving, and it's so important for them as a couple, for us having been knowing these people as part of our larger circle for years. Our guest artists, our soloists will tell you that it's way better than singing it in concert, because all of a sudden the audience is singing back at them like they're inside the sound. And so I think a lot about like, what can we do to actually get people participating in music? Because we know studies show that if you go to concerts on a regular basis, it extends your life quite dramatically. And so that's why typically symphony goers, subscribers actually, tend to live much longer than their peers who are not going to cultural events or not going to concerts in particular. And we know, but from all the studies being done, that participating in music has a huge impact on a person's sense of belonging, on a person's emotional health, their mental health. It can help stave off dementia dramatically. And so, I think of the participatory nature of music as potentially being a pill that maybe we all need to take. And so, how do we help create those things? So, in the next few years, we're gonna be rolling out a community ukulele orchestra. Come and play. We're gonna be.
I have a ukulele.
Well, come and play.
Okay.
Just join us. We're gonna roll out pub choir, where once a month just show up and sing along, and like this month it's ABBA and next month it's Messiah. Like you can do. I've often sing along Messiah is one thing. I'd love to pull off drink along Messiah. I just think that's. Handel would have loved it because he enjoyed to imbibe, and so I think he just would have loved that celebratory, festive nature of that. I think there's opportunities for us to make music in really casual ways as a community where it has such remarkable outcomes for the people engaged in it. And historically, that's not a conversation orchestras find themselves in, but it's one that we're really actively looking at and trying to make sure that music education as well at all ages is accessible and available, and like I look at what's happening in the education community, the school community, where music is playing smaller and smaller role, particularly in elementary schools, which will in turn have an impact on high schools. Band is not about creating professional musicians. Band is about creating space for kids who sometimes don't fit in anywhere else to fit in, and to make peers and friends with people whose worlds would never have connected had they not met in band class. And so if we think of music instead of a pursuit, if we think of music as a part of societal wellness, the questions we're now asking ourselves is what has to happen so that music literacy, music participation becomes accessible to everyone.
This has been amazing speaking with you.
That's a crazy goal. I don't know. It's lofty.
But it's lofty, but I think it's important too, because I think I wouldn't have picked up I wouldn't have purchased a ukulele in my 30s if it had not been for Mr. Franz's grade 4 music class at Omen School in Swift Current. And I will vividly remember Mr. Franz playing the ukulele because he was also a shop teacher, and half of his index finger was like removed in an accident, so he'd be I still remember the first time seeing Mr. Franz strumming with like half of an index finger, and I was like, well, but this beautiful sound is coming from a ukulele.
Yeah.
And like it's there's power.
It is powerful, and particularly one of the things that's if you look at the research that's been done, there's a book called "This Is Your Brain on Art," and it has a lot. It essentially gathers the research around arts and music and how it helps us. And one of the things it talks a lot about with music is, vibration is profoundly good for us because, of course, everything around us is just, a physicist will tell us it's just everything's just a vibration, right? But the vibration that music is, that particularly instruments that vibrate, so stringed instruments, percussive instruments, pianos, actually help reset some of the vibrations in us, which is why it's so good. And then you get what we call blower, seater, or woodwind instruments, brass instruments, and singing, which is the reason those things are particularly good, especially singing, is that you are taking a shorter breath in than you are giving out. And so it actually regulates your heart. And so, if we had all sorts of fancy testing machines, we could do that with Sing Along Messiah. Everybody could wear, and by the end of one of the longer choruses, actually, their hearts would all be in sync with each other. And so, it actually physically, it's not just the mental aspect of it, it physically changes us to make music. And so I think that's, I'm so fascinated by how we could make people's lives happier in a world that we're all doom scrolling TikTok. How can we break that dopamine cycle and find something in us? And I think probably it's a collision, much like sports. I mean, you have professionals and amateurs, and there's this there's always, I think in particular the music, there's this weirdness around, well, professionals and amateurs never mix, but actually, yeah, why not? Like we've talked about, and it'll happen at some point, Orchestra for Everyone, where we just pick Victoria Park, and invite anybody with an instrument to come and play along to Beethoven 5, and just see how it goes and have fun with it. And so, having to let go of the things that historically orchestras are stuck on, which is like the perfection of it and the artistic outcome. Actually, it's about a bigger outcome than that. Streaming was really difficult for the musicians when we first started because you're not used to mics in the room, let alone cameras. And so historically in classical music, you never want to make a mistake. And as young musicians, we're trained that mistakes are a bad thing. And so live streaming in particular, I had a lot of colleagues across my industry say to me, oh, you don't want to live stream. You want to film and release it later. And I disagreed because I think there is something so incredibly sexy about the live experience. If it goes wrong, who cares? Like there's a recording of a piano concerto with the great Emil Galels, who was a Russian pianist, and he recorded it once early in his life and once later in life. And later in life, there's this massive run in the first movement, and he botches it. And I live for that recording because he's human, and it's visceral, and the attack on the next chord is angry because he's upset with himself. And I if I'm given the option to listen to the perfect recording of it or when he messes it up, I will listen to the mess up every time. And so we live streamed. It was stressful, and thankfully the musicians, have adapted to we have to let go of things. Yeah, it's live. Anything could happen. And it could go wrong, and that's okay. It's not about perfect. It's about feeling something, and so that was a stressful learning curve for everyone, even for us actually. In one of the early pandemic live streams, the internet cut out on us 9 times in an hour. and and those of us sitting back behind the streaming table lost years of our lives that night. And on my drive home, because of course there was no after party because it's like pandemic, and on my drive home, I phoned my dear friend Britt Sapshala and said, "How bad was it, Brittany?" Because she and I have a pact. She's going to tell me if it's bad. I have a few friends that they know they can tell me. And she's like, "Oh my God, it was so incredible. We had so much fun. This was so great." And I went, No. Because like the internet cut out constantly. She's like, "Oh, I thought that was on my end." And it was such a moment for us to go, "Oh, okay. Like, you can have mistakes, actually. Like, we are in a world full of mistakes. And people can forgive them quite quickly. And it's not the end of the world if a mistake happens." And I think that's one of those things that music actually teaches young people, is that you're not a finished product. It's a long road to get to where you want to go. And as you become a professional musician, you find out you never get there anyway.
It's going to be so fascinating to see where you and your team take the symphony in the next few years. And as someone who's been a fan of yours from afar for a long time, it's been so nice to meet you and ask you all sorts of questions and get a little dorky about music, but it's something I love. And so I sure appreciate your time, and best of luck this season, and best of luck with the streaming too, and all the things. But yeah, you guys are doing a great work. So thank you, Mark.
Thank you. It was great to talk with you about it, and great to find out you're also from the Southwest. So there you go.
All roads lead back to Southwest Saskatchewan.
That's right.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks.
This has been Season 7, Episode 1 of YXE Underground. My name is Eric Anderson. I host, produce, and edit this local independent podcast. My thanks to Mark Turner and the entire Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra team for such a wonderful experience in creating this episode. Visit saskatoonsymphony.org to learn more about the SSO and upcoming performances, and I hope to see all of you at the Harry Potter concert on October 5th. Go Team Hufflepuff! You can listen to YXE Underground wherever you find your favorite podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, or on the website yxeunderground.com. Please feel free to leave a 5-star review if you like what you hear. You can follow YXE Underground on social media. Simply search YXE Underground on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. A special thank you to Rona Andres for taking wonderful photos for this episode, which you can see on social media. My thanks to Saskatoon's Danger Dynamite for creating and maintaining the website, and a big thank you to Nikki and the team at Mud Hut Grooming for their support of this episode. I have to tell you a little story about Mud Hut Grooming. Nikki has been taking care of our dogs for many, many years. Our previous dog, Fred, absolutely loved Nikki. He loved his haircuts. He always looked so handsome after his haircuts. And when we had to say goodbye to Fred in the fall of 2020, we sort of lost touch a bit with Nikki because it took me a long time to want a dog again because it was hard to say goodbye to Fred. But then we adopted Sam and Wiley a few years ago from the Humane Society in North Battleford. And they're just the best dogs, and I was also very excited because this way we could reconnect with Nikki again. And Nikki and her team at Mud Hut have been so wonderful to Sam and Wiley, who were not the easiest of dogs to groom when they first started seeing Nikki, but now they love their haircuts and they look so great. And I think anybody who chooses to cut the hair for dogs and cats to groom them, they're a special person because I can't imagine how hard that is. But Nikki and Mud Hut Grooming hold a special place in my heart, and so I'm very grateful that they supported this episode. So Nikki, thank you to you and your team, and thank you for taking such good care of Sam and Wiley for us. Now, before I go, I would like to acknowledge that these interviews were gathered on Treaty 6 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis. YXE Underground is a production of the Salthammer Production Company. My name is Eric Anderson, and thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon, Saskatoon.
You want him to warm up?
I would love to.
More?